Hey there, it's Andy Lockwood from Lockwood College Prep, and what follows is a recording of a live webinar on college admissions secrets. I called it the College Admissions Edge presentation, designed for parents who want to help their kids have the edge over tens of thousands of applicants, and along the way qualify for boatloads of fat, juicy merit scholarships, even if they think they can't possibly qualify. Before I turn it over to the recording, I just want to recommend highly that you like and subscribe to this channel if you agree that the information that you're getting here is different and valuable, because it's certainly not the same old stuff you hear from your guidance counselor or your school counselor, whether you go to a public or a private high school. Certainly not stuff they cover on the college nights that schools do every fall. One word of warning that I'd be remiss if I didn't say is that some of the stuff that comes out of my mouth is definitely not in the category of politically correct. I'm not saying anything to be offensive, but what I am trying to do is just share the truths that I have derived from more than 22 years as a college advisor about what it really takes to get in to an Ivy, highly selective, elite, competitive college, you name it, because it's not just about grades and SAT scores. All right, so that's my recommendation. Like and subscribe. And now, without further ado, here is the workshop that I just pulled off. Hope you find it valuable and enjoyable. Feel free to share it also. So let me share my screen here. And let's do the slide share. Let me know if you can see that. What I'm going to do is take myself off camera just so it's not distracting. Let me know in the chat if you can see the slides. I know I'm asking you guys a lot of questions in the chat, but that helps you participate and retain more information. So can you guys see the slides? Just let me know one more time. Johnny Fitz says 10th grade. I'm sure someone calls you that, John Fitzgerald. Can you see the chat? Yes, says Nick. Okay. Nick, you speak for the group. All right, so here we go. College Admissions Edge. Here's what's on tap for tonight. What high school and even younger students need to do in order to get accepted to a highly selective school, to optimize your college applications, to get an edge over your competition. We'll talk about building a strategic college list. We're going to get right into the essay, a few tips on the college essay, and we'll talk a little bit about scholarships. And this is a big one, how to avoid the biggest mistake that really everyone makes. This is a mistake that I would classify as hiding in plain sight. So, yeah, I've said this before. I'm not sure exactly what's going to come out of my mouth. I do have slides here, but I apologize in advance if it's offensive. It's not intended to be. So here's what's going to happen within the next 50 minutes or so. We'll talk about the truth, what it takes to get into a top college, how to find best fit colleges that will help your child launch for success post-college. And we'll talk about eligibility and how to maximize it so you can get some scholarships and aid and avoid overpaying, and get a handle on everything that needs to get done. You are in the right place if you have no clue whether your child can even get into a decent college, or you're frustrated that your guidance counselor hasn't lifted a finger to help you with an actual plan to get into and pay for college next year. And I just want to say this right now. I'm not anti-guidance counselor. I'm not bashing guidance counselors. In fact, we have a few guidance counselors who occasionally show up on these presentations, and I tip my hat to them because they're just trying to round out their educations. But you'll see that most guidance counselors aren't equipped to give this type of advice. If you're overwhelmed and confused by all the half-truths, urban legends, expert opinions on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok and all that, this is for you. So frequently I compare this whole process of trying to figure out getting into college as like that old show, Who Knows This? Answer in the chat if you know the name of this show. This was a show about a family who of space explorers who is bouncing around from planet to planet, each time trying to get home, trying to get to their destination, but they never quite get there. They keep getting misdirected. Nick, you're on fire. Yes, that's Lost in Space. How many people know that this was updated? There was a recent remake of Lost in Space that came out. I actually have a quick photo of that. Ha 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 ha. A lot of jokes coming tonight, guys and gals. Okay, but seriously, folks, if you don't plan, your child may not get in where they deserve, while others who don't deserve or have lesser grades and scores do get in. You may shoot yourself in the foot in terms of qualifying for tuition discounts that you deserve. Danger, this non-refundable, yet free, presentation may be controversial, even offensive. I was warning you guys at the beginning, but I don't have any agenda other than telling the truth that I have arrived at, but you may have your own truth. So part of that difference is part and parcel with the fact that this is not going to be right for everybody, but it's not based on bragging or fake news or urban legend. It's based on real world experiences, thousands of families that we've helped through the process. And if you're thinking to yourself, I am so overwhelmed, don't think it's your fault. If you have any of these questions, test optional. Should we submit our scores? Should we not submit our scores? Are there any safety schools anymore? Should we apply early decision, restricted early action, single choice early action, double top secret, VIP, platinum action, etc.? This stuff is very, very confusing, even for people who have been thinking about this like our clients have for the last 2 or 3 years. So you have plenty of company, especially when it comes to figuring out the financial aid aspects. This is not a financial aid webinar. I am going to be making a few remarks about it. This is more about admissions, but that stuff is even more complicated, and that's why we do a separate presentation on that pretty much each month. You're not taught this. Things are way different than when we all applied, assuming we're about the same age back in the day, and your counselor's not trained. So before we begin, take a breath. If you're drinking an adult beverage or self-medicating somehow, take a sip. Take out your magic wand and just imagine you didn't have any stress about your kid's ability to get into a great college, and you didn't have any worries about being able to afford it, and you had clarity and confidence each step of the way about what needs to be done, what you need to do, and what your son or your daughter needs to do. That's my goal here. And we are blessed and very lucky to have great clients and who have great results. This was a very cool one. Sometimes we get feedback from our students about their applications that we help them submit. So if you're new to our community here, I see some new faces. A little bit about us. We are college advisors, Pearl and I. Pearl focuses more on the financial aid aspect, and I handle most of the college advising. I've written a bunch of books. And I'm working on another one right now that's going to be released. So that's a big deal, big way for us to reach people. Maybe you've read some. I was even in that documentary. How many of you guys, just say in the chat if you have actually seen this documentary on Netflix, Operation Varsity Blues, the college admissions scandal? I was in there for approximately 58 seconds. I was not featured as a suspect. I was there as an expert. Have you guys seen that? Just it came out a couple of years ago, I guess 2021, and it was basically a reenactment of the wiretap transcriptions of that college advisor, Rick Singer, who's now out of jail and apparently back in the college advising business. So I actually recommend it. I think for those of you who have seen it, let me know, or let us know in the chat if you thought it was pretty good. It was it was so good because it was all fact-based. It wasn't overacted at all. So highly recommend it. If you take nothing else away from it, you'll see how crazy the parents are. These are the people that you may not think of yourself in this category, and you're probably not, but there are people out there who are so crazy. So anyway, my own backstory is I went to a really expensive college. My dad was a a low income, very low income artist slash journalist. His attitude about money was he wasn't really concerned with it. Just he advised me, don't worry about all the debt. It's all going to work out. Just get into the best school that you can. It didn't really work out so well. I racked up over $100,000 of debt between college and law school. I had to, work 7 days a week bartending, which I actually enjoyed. It didn't feel like a drudgery, but I wouldn't have done it unless I had to pay off all these loans. It did lead to, typical stuff that happens when you're burdened with debt, including credit issues, etc. So this is something that we don't wish on our own kids. We have currently 3 in college. Yes, you heard that right. And of course, this is one of the big reasons we got into the field of college advising back in 2000 initially, because we want to help everyone avoid this. So just a couple more client results. We're pretty good at negotiating results. We were able to get this client an extra $9,400 from BC last year. Very good at college essays. Sometimes students get a little upset or confused about advice from their English teachers who don't really necessarily understand how the college essay works or what its purpose is. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And like I said before, we're very fortunate and grateful to have clients from all walks of life, all shapes and sizes and colors, and you name it. A lot of self-employed clients, a lot of student athletes, some school administrators, you name it. We have a very interesting business, but we have a different approach, different than people you may have talked to who focus on just, get into a good college. And that's their sole focus, getting into a rear window sticker colleges. But then what happens? Like, you read these ads, you probably see them the same way I do. 93% of our clients get into one of their top 3 choices. And I see something like that. I'm like, number one, okay, well, I guess I could recommend, Harvard, Yale, and Joe's community college, for my top 3 picks, and have a stat just like that. But number 2, I think the bigger picture is, well, then what happens? Once you get in, is it goodbye and good luck? To me, that's like rushing to the airport without knowing where the flight was going. I think that's nuts. So that's why we have a different approach. So here is a little bit about the system that I highly recommend. And this speaks to the biggest mistake, I think, that parents and families make. They don't plan this way. So our 4-part P4 system stands for plan, path, position, and produce. Plan means understanding your child's wiring and backward planning, figuring out potential careers and majors that lead to those careers that could be a good fit, where work doesn't feel like work all the time, where it feels like play, and you can make a living, get off the mom and dad full ride scholarship, which is why I constantly say, and if you've heard this before, apologies, non-refundable free workshop. It's about the 40, not the 4. It's about the 40 years after college, not about 4. I think that gets overlooked in this whole process. We're not going to be talking more about this after this slide, but I think that's the biggest mistake. It reminds me of one of the first clients we put through this aspect of our planning about 9 years ago. And her father was pressuring her to go into the family business, which is running a pharmacy at one of the local towns over nearby. And she had no interest at all in going into it. So I was like, okay, Danielle, let's go through the assessment and let's look at the results. And if they don't make sense for you in terms of, objectively looking at how you're wired and what your strengths are, let's get your dad in on that. So we did the meeting with mom and dad on it, which is not always the case, but I recommend it. And they spoke to our career counselor and they looked at the results of the assessment. And it was painfully obvious that she should never go into the pharmacy business because she sucked at chemistry and there's all sorts of other red flags. And then the dad finally begrudgingly agreed. Okay, yeah, you're right. And I really believe that potentially saved Danielle, our client, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 years of frustration and misery. So that's why it's super important. Okay, the second P stands for path, which means for us, now we start backing into a college list based on colleges that are reputable across a cluster of majors, plus your typical factors, size, locations, student-teacher ratio, career center support, and of course, hoodie and mascot. That's funny, but it's true. So what happens if you don't do this stuff? Well, it's an endemic of major switching. 75% apparently switch majors. But if you do this 2 or 3 times, hello, 6-year plan, $90,000 a year on top of the 4 years that you're plunking that cash down. That is salt in the wound. Or you can graduate with a worthless degree. It's so easy to go to college and major in things like, I don't know, sociology or gender studies. Or have you ever heard a boss say, get me the puppeteering major? No, of course not. You can major in puppeteering in many colleges, including the University of Connecticut. This is not what you want your kid's outcome to be after college, after they get a degree. All right. Do you guys see why you can't afford to wing it? Let me know in the chat if you agree with this. Let me take a quick sip of my beverage. You see why we can't afford to wing it? Yes. I see. Yeah, okay. See some positive comments here. Thanks, guys. All right. This is what we're going to be spending most of our time on today, which is positioning. In terms of lay of the land, applications are way up thanks to the test optional era, use of the common application, and a bunch of other factors. Those are the mean ones. But the dirty little secret about competitive colleges is it's pretty easy to manipulate them, rank, both legally as well as in an underhanded way, perhaps illegally, like Columbia, Baylor, GW, Emory. This type of thing goes back for years, over a decade at least. My favorite one is that Baylor told their admitted students that if they retook the SAT, they would get $300, and if they increased the score by 50 points, they'd get $1,000. Unbelievable. So don't trust rank. Let's talk about acceptance rates. A lot of that has to do with the availability of the Common App. More people are applying to top colleges because they feel wealthy because of the stock market. This is even before the recent Trump boom. Even the real estate market is up, making people feel wealthier and able to afford more expensive colleges. I don't know what's going to happen this coming cycle, but the amount of international, meaning full pay students, is way up, and their applications are huge. I mentioned before, test optional policies caused a huge uptick, and all this marketing by these colleges, the texts and the emails and the phone calls, and it's not just brochures from random schools you've never heard about. Let me just share a few things about how I think things are changing a little bit in the admissions world. There is more reliance on whether you demonstrated interest, which I'll talk about. There's more reliance or more emphasis on this supplemental college essays from schools that ask, why are you applying here? So those have to be, your whole application has to be as perfect as it can be, but those are pretty important. I think teacher recommendations are more important too. And those are just some of the highlights. It used to be that if you had great grades and scores, you would get in. But what happened? Well, it seems as though, and I think it's 85% of students in high school have a grade in the mid 90% range. Everyone has A's. There are no C students anymore. I'm talking about grade inflation. That's a big reason why most of the Ivies have abandoned test optional policies or are in the process of abandoning them, as well as many other colleges. My guess is 70 to 75% of colleges are still test optional, but I think that's a dying factor, a dying death of how college admissions is changing. I don't think that top schools in general are not going to allow you to submit scores anymore very soon. because they're accurate predictors of how well you're going to perform in college, and because they actually, for the most part, promote diversity. That's what many of the colleges thought, and that explanation is beyond the scope of tonight's presentation. Diversity is very important for colleges, particularly on the heels of last year's Supreme Court decision declaring affirmative action in college admissions to be unconstitutional. Since then, some colleges have seen drops in diversity, like a little bit, and some have seen increases in diversity, which is interesting because that's no longer a factor that you can, let's say, check a box off on the Common Application, but there are other ways to ascertain diversity, and I'm talking specifically about another supplemental essay that asks you about your community or where you're from. So anyway, test scores accomplish important things for colleges. So they're not going away. But there's one question that's technically not on the Common Application. That's why I call it invisible. And that's the question that needs to be answered above all when you sit back and you look at the whole application, the GPA, the transcripts, the recommendations, the test scores in most cases, the activities section, the personal statement, the supplemental essays. There should be what I call a thread of continuity that runs through this whole application, that puts it together and answers the invisible question, why should we take you instead of this sea of sameness, instead of 50,000 or 100,000 identical kids? Why you? You've got to be able to answer that. And I am not going to call on anyone tonight to do that, but we're going to talk about how you can answer that. Understand, you should be thinking about this not as a meritocracy. This is about marketing, not a meritocracy. How do you market your kid? Most of the kids I meet with, they don't really think this way. So I'll end up saying something to them like, look, Nick, you are not, as we work together, you are not Nick applying to college. You are the marketer of Nick applying to college. You've got to step back and think about your market, your audience, your admissions officers, and what they are looking for, what their problem is that they're trying to solve, or what their desires are, and then try to serve it up. A great example of positioning is Avis Rent-A-Car. I talk about this one a lot. They turned a weakness that they were smaller than Hertz into a strength. We try harder. We can't afford dirty ashtrays. This is, in a nutshell, a great analogy for what you need to be doing as a college applicant, leveraging your strengths and minimizing your weaknesses. All right, let's talk more specifics about admissions. Let's talk about 60-40. 60% of the college application approximately is based on academic factors. Your GPA, your rigor, which gets overlooked a lot, and your test scores. We'll come back to rigor. But briefly, it just means your AP classes or your IB classes. The more you take, the more competitive you are. The fewer you take, the less competitive you are. And that gets overlooked, I would say, by at least half of our clients. Because when they meet with guidance counselors to go over their schedule, they're not necessarily getting this advice. If they are gunning for a top-tier school, an IB or a very selective school, you've got to max out your APs and IBs. All right. 40% of the application is a combination of things that are out of your control and things that are in your control. We'll talk about those. Another thing that might be startling is that at most competitive colleges, a certain percentage, anywhere from half to 2/3 of seats for every incoming class are reserved for non-academic purposes. They were reserved for special categories, which could mean these. Mostly, these are the top ones. The visually diverse students, recruited athletes, legacies, people on the development list, international students, early decision applicants, low income. Here's the politically incorrect but factual statement here. These applicants, these special categories, tend to have lower grades and scores. So here's the implication. If you're not one of those special categories and you're looking at the median published by that school, you better be above that median to have a good chance of getting in. If you're at the median, your chances aren't as great as you might think. All right, part 2. Everything that you put on an application is on the record from 9th grade forward, which is a big reason why many families, even at private high schools, turn to us and college consultants in general, because they understand that first college meeting in 11th grade is way too late. So everything you're doing from 9th grade, including extracurriculars in school, out of school, summer activities, and then, of course, things that are in your control when you apply, such as your recommendations and your essays. All right, let me talk to you quickly about the different types of extracurricular activities that are good and bad, or typical versus atypical. Now, I wouldn't say the typical activities are bad. That's I misspoke. But they're just not going to help you get into college. There's a difference between being in a club, which is fine, versus founding one. Participating in last weekend's cancer and, I don't know, combination cancer, IBF, an autism research walk versus founding your own charity. The difference between being on a team versus captain or all league. You get the point here. There's a difference between typical and atypical. And the kids who tend to get in to the top colleges have applications and activities that are loaded with atypical, and occasionally even world-class or certainly state class types of achievement on there. That's who you're going up against if you're gunning for a top college. Here's a quick case study. It's one of my favorite case studies. Matt and Andrew, who are your two typical robotics nerds, and great kids, but just very shy. And Julie, the mom, really stressed out about what they could do to stand out. And we had so many discussions over more than 3 months about what they could do. So then finally, we came up with a brainstorm. They could teach middle schoolers about robotics and coding to act as like a farm system for the high school program. So that was pretty cool, and they did that. They took that initiative, they took that advice. But then the school year ended, and I was like, well, wait a minute. What's next? What about over the summer? What about some of these little nerds, the poor nerds? What are you going to do with them? Well, we decided to create a summer program out of thin air, which turned out to be a big deal. Here's what happened. They got written up in the local newspaper that was parlayed into local television, which is pretty big for two introverted kids. And then lo and behold, they were accepted into the top choice school. Mom wrote us a great text. And then she heard later from the admissions person. Again, this doesn't happen all the time, but when we get this type of feedback, we had exceptional applications and should be particularly proud. So much of the application is based on your signed advice. Pretty awesome stuff. And before I get into the next slide, what's even more awesome is now these guys have graduated college. One was computer science, one was physics major. And they each got funded by Y Combinator, which is like a legendary startup, venture cap, or I don't know what they're called, but they funded DoorDash and Stripe and a whole bunch of other companies that you've heard of. So now these guys have positioned themselves for success post-college, and I couldn't be happier for them. All right, let's get back to test optional here. Admissions officers would rather see them than not. They are helpful, of course not perfect, but they're very helpful predictors of performance. Let me just say this, though. There's a difference between applying test optional and getting in test optional. A lot of people overlook that. Originally, it was designed to level the playing field for under-resourced families who couldn't afford high-priced consultants, but it didn't really do much to improve diversity, and that's one of the big reasons why many colleges are no longer test optional. Here's my rule of thumb about whether you should submit your scores or not. This is something that we're spending a lot of time on now in our practice. If you're at the upper end of the published range, of course you should submit. If you're at the median, you should most likely submit. If you're below, if you're in that 25 percentile range, I hardly ever recommend submitting because you don't want to give them a reason to reject you. But understand, if you don't submit your scores, that makes the rest of your application more important. That's just simple logic. If you don't submit your scores, you may not be in the running for merit aid. So my advice is, when you're starting early, particularly in 11th grade, get your scores as high as possible, and then decide whether to submit on a school-by-school basis, which I'm going to show you how to do. By the way, Pearl, I don't know, can you still hear me? She may have gone upstairs. We just got some great news literally an hour before I went on the air here. One of our students texted Marissa, our head tutor, who got a perfect PSAT. His name is Jack Reynolds, and then Danielle Carbone will almost definitely qualify as a national merit finalist based on her PSAT, because they started prepping for the SAT, which of course helps with the PSAT. And I think last week we heard about 3 kids who were in 11th grade who ended up getting their target scores, which were 34. 3 kids had 34s. So in their cases, they're going to be submitting everywhere, these kids, and that will help them. So how do you figure this out? So there's something called the Common Data Set. I think this one is for Princeton. And the question is, what's the 50th percentile? So you can see that at this school, which is one of the elite schools, the 50th percentile for the SAT is 750, 790, a total of 1540, and the ACT is a 35. So here's an interesting question. If you have a 34 on the ACT, should you submit to Princeton? Well, I may violate my own rule there and say, yeah, that's close enough. I would submit. But if it were like a 31, if that were the 25th percentile, then I probably wouldn't submit it. So you can look up each school's median SAT score on the Common Data Set. This takes some time to do it, but you want to go, I would Google Syracuse University Common Data Set, and then you'll see something like 24 pages of spreadsheet. But part C is, like I'm showing you here, is the one that publishes this information. So the Common Data Set, you got to search it for each school to figure out whether you should submit or not. All right, here's something else, also coincidentally from Princeton. This is my business partner who was on the admissions committee of Princeton for 30 years. I want to show you what else they look at in the application. You see all this stuff here that has to do with character or personal attributes, right? Achievement, talent, leadership, how you are revealed in the application, interview, essay, and then creativity, work habits, maturity, motivation, leadership, integrity, concern for others, initiative, right? These are all from his crib sheet back when he was part of the admissions committee, which is why I also say character is the new SAT. Character is super important. That's revealed through this application, this thread of continuity. All right, let's turn to why kids who deserve to get in don't. Well, we talked about this a little bit before. College admissions is not a meritocracy. Colleges have their own agendas. More first-generation students, classics majors, more full pay. And then they care about the yield. Let's talk about what that means and why. These are 2 schools that are notorious for protecting their yield. Why academically stronger students get deferred while lesser students get admitted. They're watching you to see if you are likely to come. The yield is the ratio of admitted students versus matriculated. If too many students that a college admits say thanks but no thanks, that is bad for them on a number of fronts. So they are monitoring to see if you visit campus, which of course no one can visit every college campus. If you meet and give your name to the college reps if they visit your high school, and a few other these things, but understand that they're following, they have the ability to see what you're doing. So if you follow them on social and you get on their email list and you don't click or open the emails, that's an issue. But if you do click and open and spend time on the links that they send you, that could be helpful. It all gets monitored by software, a lot of AI in there informing their algorithms. and colleges rely on a whole class of consultants called enrollment management consultants to help them parse this data and to figure out who to admit and how much money to give. Oh, final tip here. You've got to do this for your safety schools also, not just for the colleges that you're lusting after. Okay? You guys understand that? Are you guys finding this helpful? Let me know in the chat how I'm doing here. While I just take a quick refreshing sip. But hopefully I'm giving you the information that I promised you. John, Joseph, Ava, this is very helpful. Michelle, Paula, doing great. Okay, Vera, yeah, thank you. Yeah, all right, awesome, super helpful from Stephanie. Thank you guys. That helps me. Okay, final comments. Let's talk about developing a balanced list. That's got to include plenty of safeties. If a kid's applying to, let's say, 15 colleges, which may seem like a lot of schools, but that's, it's not so much. These days, I would say no more than 3 to 4-ish tops should be reach colleges, and all the rest should be either 50-50 or better. That is my personal guideline. You get one shot at early decision, which is people think of it as binding. It's really not binding. So the question is always, should you use it on a school where you have a 2% chance, or are you better off using it strategically at a school where you're 50-50, but that could put you over the hump? And there's arguments on both sides. There's the rational argument, and then there's the emotional argument. Different people resolve it differently. Okay, I do recommend everyone apply early action, but that doesn't really help you get in. There's no stats bearing that out as far as I can tell. And you don't always find out early. Just because you apply early action under the premise that you will find out early and reduce some of the stress in the process. What's happened in the last at least 2 years, I think longer, is that colleges were inundated with so many applications that they just deferred 50 to 80% of their applicants because they didn't have enough manpower to read through the applications. And we want everything to be as practically perfect as possible. Oh, for those of you who use Naviance or SCORE at your high school, put that in the chat if your high school uses either Naviance or SCORE, SCOIR. Those are, I guess those are software subscriptions that high schools use to do a few things, partially to upload the guidance counselor and the teacher recommendations, but also to help handicap your odds of admission at your various colleges. So let me just see here. I see Nick says Naviance, Paula says Naviance, Julia says Naviance. Yeah, Naviance I think is more Sylvia. Okay, so Geraldine says SCORE. Yeah, so they're kind of similar. They're more similar than different. But the problem with both of those is that Naviance and SCORE, here's a public service announcement. Naviance considers grades and scores only versus admissions officers who consider your rigor, which doesn't show up directly, at least, on Naviance and SCORE, plus all these other factors. Again, a lot of the stuff that's out of your control, like race and ethnicity, and are you an international student? Are you a recruited athlete? That type of thing. The other thing, that bottom section here, is for the most part, Naviance and SCORE look at exclusively your high school's results, but you're not competing with your high school students. You're competing with kids all over the country. Yeah, well, technically all over the world, but certainly all over the country. So how you stack up versus kids in your high school versus nationwide can be discrepant, can be a big difference. So that's why I don't use Naviance. What we use is the software that my Princeton business partner developed, which looks at roughly 20 categories. So of course there's grades, there's SAT and ACT scores, there's level, which is the amount of rigor. And then activity is sort of all the qualitative factors that have to do with character and volunteering and awards won and things like that. So this is actually my older daughter. I told you I had 3 kids in college. I've got 4 kids total. My older daughter, who's a senior in college at Michigan, when we ran this, her GPA was equal to the median. Her SAT was equal to the median. That's what those yellow equal sign thingamajiggies say. And then she was competitive. So the blue category meant that she had roughly a 65% chance of getting in, which was not quite accurate, but that's where she ended up getting in. She also actually got into an Ivy, but she just elected not to go there, and now she's finishing up, and she loves. She got everything out of her college, so she did great. All right, so let me talk a little bit about guidance counselors. This is sort of an apology in advance if you haven't read this book, The Pocket Guide to Surviving Your Guidance Counselor's Lack of Advice. So I'll say this, not to curry favor with anyone, but just to point out, you need to give them a little bit of a break. They're outnumbered. They're not trained in these areas. They don't meet you until it's too late. They don't think entrepreneurially for the most part. It's very unusual for a guidance counselor to think like a marketer, like someone who owns his or her own business. If nothing else, maybe you can't stand me, but I would think you would have to admit I'm a pretty solid marketer. I think entrepreneurially. That's, again, I don't claim that's the right way for everyone, but you're not going to find most guidance counselors to think this way. Sometimes, particularly at private high schools, sometimes they can't go to bat for 2 kids applying to the same school or some other crazy agendas. Now, this I understand is controversial, but I'm only saying this based on more than a decade of conversations with clients who had their kids get lowballed by the guidance counselors one way, shape, or form. And I cover this in that book that I mentioned, which is based on parents submitting bits of bad advice that I collated and made into a webinar. So I didn't really write this book. Other parents did. But what I mean by the GC lowball is along the lines of, don't take the extra AP class. You're going to be too stressed out. Okay, I appreciate the advice not to be stressed out, but it's not right for everyone. Now, the reason I appreciate it is because there's all kinds of depression and anxiety and horrible stuff happening at pretty much every high school in the country. But if your child is gunning for Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Brown, whatever, they need to do that. And most of the time, when you talk to your guidance counselor, that was not them growing up when they were in high school. So that's just a theory I have. I can't prove it. And I told you this non-refundable webinar would be controversial. So I am delivering on that. You're welcome. Okay, let's talk kitty cat. Let's talk about the essay. What's the purpose of the personal statement? In my opinion, the main purpose is to replace the college interview. Most colleges don't do that anymore. They might send out an alum to interview your child on Zoom or at the library or Panera or something like that. But any type of personal insight that may have come up in an interview before has been relegated to the personal statement. The supplemental essays, particularly why are you applying here essay, the purpose of that is different. It's to show that you've done your research, your due diligence, to convince in a persuasive manner your admissions officer that the college is a good fit for you and vice versa. Essays do not have to be like a Lifetime movie drama. It's okay to be about something small, like cooking dinner. I just read a great essay last week that was all about cooking dinner, the student. Don't go for original. That's a common objection I get when I'm working with kids to brainstorm their essays. It's not, I just can't write that. It's not original. And I'll say, look, your admissions officer has been working there, 5 years, reviewing 1,000 applications a year. Each application has 1 to 4 or 5 essays and short answers, they've probably seen it all. Don't worry about being original, but you've got to be interesting. You don't have to, but you have to go overboard and write one of those essays that get passed around the internet. Oh, she got into Stanford because she wrote this essay about Costco. It doesn't have to be about that. Okay. This is one of these things I think is kind of obvious, but I feel like I need to say this. Don't use ChatGPT for your final draft. You can certainly use it to help you get a first draft going, but as of now, those essays don't offer any personal insight, and they're very bland. Here's some mistakes. You get a choice of prompts. They're all pretty open-ended, but if you write an essay and the person reads it and they're like, "What prompt is this?" That's pretty common. That's a big mistake. I talked about number 2, not giving any actual personal insight. Number 3, get the wrong tone. Sometimes essays come across as being a little angry or defensive. Sometimes it's a little harder to pick up, but you've got to be very sensitive to that. This is a big one. Too many co-authors, too many chefs in the kitchen to spoil the dish. I mentioned ChatGPT. I did not yet mention Mom GPT. I have no problem with parents being involved with the essay process, but I prefer that they don't get involved until the end, once we finalize it, just to let them read it over, because after all, Mom and Dad, you do know your kids better than everyone else, but you may not know what it takes to write a good college essay. And then the wrong chef in the kitchen, working with someone who doesn't understand the purpose of the essay. And sometimes that could be an English teacher or a guidance counselor. And I said this before, the biggest problem is not being interesting. Again, doesn't have to be original, but it does have to be interesting. Some tips: embrace short-term discomfort to avoid severe, excruciating pain in the fall. Get everything done over the summer. Do your best. Don't use big words when normal-sized words are sufficient. This is something that I admit I fall prey to also. When you're writing, you're writing, and then when you're editing, you're editing. Don't write and edit at the same time. You'll never get it done. Just write freely, then go back and correct your typos, but also other corrections. Don't write these at the last minute. Essays need to breathe. And this is a big one that I personally find very, very helpful. And every kid that I've recommended this to has reported that they agreed with me. Once you're done with a few drafts, read it aloud, and you will pick up verbally, orally, on stuff that you did not see visually when you were rereading and rereading the same stuff over and over again, because your eyes fill in gaps so you don't see typos. You get a little sloppy if you just work on it without reading aloud. So I really recommend that. Here's an example of how we try to help kids finish all this stuff off over the summer. In June, as school is winding down, we'll go through the prompts. In July, we try to finalize the personal statement. In August, as we're finalizing the college lists, we can draft the supplemental essays for at least the top several colleges. And then in September, get serious about planning for the financial aid process and holding you accountable the whole way through. That was me clapping, which is annoying. Pearl hates when I do that. But that's a big part of this too. Okay, let's talk money. And by the way, I see some questions coming in, so that is great. Pearl's been logging them and sorting them for me, so I will be answering those questions. All right. So I've heard something about college being expensive and increasing faster than any other industry. There's all this horrible loan stuff out there, parents borrowing, sacrificing their retirement, but it's not all hopeless. Colleges will sometimes play ball with you. Here's an example from over a decade ago now of an initial offer. By the way, it's never a round number, $23,518 that we were able to negotiate to $53,540, which is an increase of $30,022 donuts. And no, these results are not typical. Past performance is not an indicator of future results, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the process of negotiating momentarily. But first, let's talk about different types of aid. There's Kool-Aid, there's need-based aid, there's merit-based aid. There are tax strategies, which we call tax scholarships. And then there are outside scholarships from other entities, which I'm not going to really cover today, but maybe I'll do that in the future. All right, the need-based aid system is based on your income, your assets, basically your ability to pay as calculated through entering information into the FAFSA, Free Application for Federal Student Aid, FAFSA. Some people pronounce it FASFA. They're dumb. It's FAFSA. Okay. In financial aid, the interesting thing, this was a Wall Street Journal headline from years ago, financial aid is about where you have saved, not how much. And I'll give you some concrete examples there. The most widely used financial aid applications are the FAFSA and the CSS profile, although several colleges have their own financial aid applications. The rules are complicated and frequently don't make sense. You may not qualify, but that may not be a bad thing. You still may have to file a FAFSA to be considered for merit aid at a few schools, like locally, Fordham and NYU. The rules changed in 2024. That was a cluster, you know what. I'm still sorting that out. Let me talk to you about how to hide your money, because this seems to be one of the more popular topics. Even though they're fun to discuss, they may not pay off for you. So there are 4 legal shelters in the FAFSA, buried in the FAFSA, in the financial aid formula, which are your primary residence, retirement accounts, life insurance with cash value, and annuities. So when I say legal shelters, what I mean are 2 things. Number one, if you're filling out your own FAFSA and you actually read the directions, it'll tell you in plain English, don't include these 4 things. We want to know about your current value of your current net worth, but your net worth does not include these 4 things. So if you include these 4 things by mistake, you will artificially sabotage your eligibility that you otherwise deserve. Okay? So that's one way to think about these 4 types of assets. The second way is as a shelter, how to hide your money from the financial aid office. If you have money saved in the wrong place, let's say it's a trust account for your kid, that's going to penalize you severely. But that same amount, let's say it's $100,000. In the financial aid formulas, that would penalize you up to $25,000 because you have it in the wrong place. Remember, it's not how much you have saved, it's where you have it saved. So $100,000 in your kid's name penalizes you up to $25,000. However, that same amount of money, 100 large, if you had that deposited into an annuity or life insurance with cash value, your penalty is 0. Now, the rules are different, some slightly different between the FAFSA and the CSS profile. The profile is much more complicated, and there might be 200 to 300 questions, whereas the FAFSA is anywhere from 50 to 80 questions. Okay. So I know I'm moving quickly here because the focus of this presentation is really more on admissions, and we will do another financial aid webinar this month. Some thoughts on merit aid. There's actually more out there than need-based aid. So if you don't qualify for need-based aid, that's actually okay. You have a better shot at getting money on the merit side. Colleges will bribe kids that they want to come. The average tuition discount, and this includes need-based, but the average discount from a private college is 56%, 56.1%. And in any given college, roughly 25 to 30% pay full boat. It's a little bit higher at Ivies and selective colleges, but for the most part, more than half of the families that go there are receiving some sort of discount. How do you figure out what you're going to end up paying? The net price calculator that's on each website of every college that you're applying to can be helpful, but they're sort of garbage in, garbage out. Your best bet is to apply to colleges that are a good fit that also want your kid, not colleges where your child has to beg, borrow, and steal and scratch and claw their way to get in. And private colleges, even though they cost the most, tend to be the most generous. So don't overlook private colleges just because of sticker price. And I keep mentioning this, these colleges will negotiate. There were some recent changes for business owners, but the value of your business is still very subjective. There is a whole set of savings out there in the tax code that my legendary accountant Rick refers to as tax scholarships that include some of these items, which may or may not pertain to you. There's 153 provisions in practice. It might be 7 or 8 that really pertain to most people, including Section 127 plan, going with the C Corp status instead of an S Corp, etc. You know what? Let's talk pizza. This is a negotiation from last year, almost a full year ago, where we were able to help our client get an extra $9,800 just by informing the financial aid office that they overvalued our client's business, specifically their assets, some of which included restaurant equipment, were offset by debt, by loans, equipment loans. So I was able to point that out in a letter that I drafted that our client sent, and that resulted in an extra close to 10 grand. So if you're going to negotiate a lowball award, and this is another book that I wrote, How to Negotiate Your Crappy Financial Aid Merit Aid Offer, your best bet is if you have new information since the base year. So what is base year? That's an important concept. If you have someone who graduates in 2026, I saw a lot of people with 11th graders, your base year of income that they're looking at is 2024. If you had a decent 24, but 2025 was really bad for you income-wise or a big drop-off, they won't know that. So that's new information since your base year. Or let's say you had increased expenses. Something bad happened, like you got sued, or you had to sue someone, or you got divorced, or you had hurricane or other property damage, unreimbursed medical expenses, you name it. They would care about those unusual expenses. They don't care about cost of living, by the way. My favorite new information is offers from other competitor colleges that you can use to play off against the main college. So they all have their own protocols. Either you write them an email or you fill out a form. Whatever you do, follow their lead. Don't be adversarial. Don't be annoying. All right, let me talk to you about how to put this all together. All right. Remember, I mentioned it before that it's a backwards approach. When you think about college as a means to an end to help you launch for post-college success. That's big. We are different about our approach, right? So it's not right for everyone. We're all about the college return on investment, which means getting more out of it than what you put in and helping your child launch for success after college. And of course, getting it for the right piece. That's a big piece of the puzzle, the right price. You've got two choices. You could either do it on your own, which a lot of people do, and sometimes it works out, and frequently it does not work out. Or you can invest in a tested and proven program. The first step is usually a consultation, but I am waiving that fee if you book today. There is a green button right on the screen. If you're watching this with us live, if somehow this is recorded and you're watching it somewhere else, go to collegestrategysession.com. We got all sorts of great comments from our clients. A lot of college planners promise but don't deliver. In your case, I got real results. Parents thank me for giving them your name. Here's a case study of two twins, parents of twins who had no eligibility for need-based aid. We were able to help them negotiate an extra, if you multiply it over 4 years, $132,000. It was 18 grand per year for one, 15 grand per year for the other kid. 132 grand. Not bad. And of course, we're very good at reverse engineering what it takes to get in to top colleges, including Ivy Leagues. Guess where our daughter went? That's our daughter, Sammy. So the program is the P4 system, plan, path, position, produce. It's for select families who want to multiply their odds of admission to highly selective and competitive colleges that will launch your child for success post-colleges. Let me just say this, because as we wind down this admissions cycle, I want to be clear that we're not right for everyone. Here is who should not inquire. If your child is not coachable and not motivated, I don't really care about grades and that type of thing, but I do care about attitude. So if they're not motivated, and they're just going to be a pain to work with, and they're going to blow off meetings and not take our advice and force us to ask for the same thing like 5 times, take a pass. We're not good with kids like that. There's plenty of other advisors who will put themselves through that. We're too busy to do that. If parents who think they know more than us, don't reach out to us. Helicopter parents, snowplow parents, people who don't respond. Oh, we have a meeting set up, and then they don't show up. Or I sent you our financial aid applications to review. This is Pearl now. I'm channeling Pearl. I sent you applications to review 32 days ago, and it's the day before deadline, and I followed up with you 5 times, and I haven't heard back from you. If that's you, please, we're not right for you. If you're not fun, oh my God. If you're an energy vampire, no. And listen, I won't dance around this. We're not cheap. We require a significant investment to work with us, but you can see the results that our clients have gotten. So parents who want to be cheap on their way to success, who don't understand return on investment, we're not a good fit. Again, these results aren't typical necessarily, but here's another example where we were able to have Brown University double their original offer, $70,000. Look, just to be brutally honest with you here, I'm going to lay it on thick. One little mistake in this process can cost thousands of dollars. Your child, as special as they are to you, to admissions officers, they are one out of many in a sea of sameness. Many parents, they attend these types of presentations, or they talk to other people, go to other presentations, and they figure out, you know what, I'll do this when I get around to it, but then they wake up too late and they wonder what happened because they just kept putting it off. And I hear this all the time. I really wish I had hired you before. There is a huge time savings. You won't feel overwhelmed. You'll get clarity and confidence, and we'll be the ones holding your kids accountable, not you. That preserves your relationship. Okay, let's talk about return on advisor. Our investment is less than one small scholarship, and the advice and coaching preserves your relationship with your child, deflates tension. It gives your child the edge over their competitors. Look, don't fumble things now. Don't fumble on the goal line. After years of doing everything for your child, all the tutors, the coaching, the camps, drying and flying all over creation, this is when they need you the most. What good was doing all that stuff before? Don't look back in a year or 4 years from now and regret that you should have done more. Go ahead and book us. It's free. There's no obligation. You will speak to our enrollment advisor, Maddie, who will kind of screen you and give you all the details and let you know about next steps, which could include actually speaking with me, if that's appropriate. But you got to do it now, because this process is like a train. It arrives on schedule and it leaves the station whether or not you're ready. So go ahead and book it now. I'm going to answer a couple questions in the chat before I come back on the screen here. Let's see here. Poll status, attendees, Q&A, questions. Okay. Nick wants to know, is there a place to see this again? I did not record this. I didn't set this up to be recorded, but I'm not sure. Joanne, no personal insight. Shouldn't there be some? Yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying. The essays, they're personal statements. They should be very personal. Questions from John about ROTC. Yeah, that's a whole another ball of wax. I have students who pursue that, but I wouldn't call myself an expert on that. Jenna, If the Department of Education dismantled, what effect will that have on admissions and financial aid? Well, I don't see that happening at all, let alone overnight. But well, yeah, it's too early to tell. Hi, Pearl. What do you think the effect of the recent election results will be on the college admissions process this year? Well, too soon to tell. I don't think there's going to be much of an impact, honestly. John had a question about high school rankings. I think I was talking about college rankings when I was talking about rankings. Let's see. Does a perfect PSAT score guarantee some scholarship? Yeah, there are many colleges that offer that, for not just perfect, but also high PSAT, but also, of course, the actual SAT. All right, Nick, great question. 529s. 529s are, all right, so let me come back on camera here. Allow me to stop my sharing. And boom. Okay. 529s count as they penalize you. And for the most part, they count as a parent asset, which is not as harsh as a child asset, but some schools still count them as a child asset. So the question about the 529 is not whether it penalizes you or not, it's how much. So that was a great question. All right, let me get into the chat again. These are great questions. Awkward silent pause. Okay. Okay, G. On the FAFSA or the CSS, do we put a 529 as our students' assets or ours? Those are treated differently on the 529. They'll give you on the CSS than the FAFSA. You've got to read the directions. But the way the formulas treat the 529, that's the issue. But you've got to fill out these forms precisely the way they ask you to. How do colleges learn about your high school rigor? They look at your transcript. That was from Michelle. Adriana, is Eagle Scout beneficial? Yeah. Okay, so that's a good example of in that discussion of typical versus atypical. So, being a scout is typical. A lot of kids do scouting. Being an Eagle Scout, joining the rarefied air, top 4% or whatever it is of scouts, that's atypical. And that also demonstrates all sorts of personal qualities: perseverance, community service, maturity, because you have to do leadership things, be a patrol leader, that type of thing. So that is a huge thing. If your kid is doing scouting and waffling on going all the way to Eagle, I would urge them wholeheartedly to continue on. I've actually had that conversation a lot. Ashley, my son's a percussionist. Music is his focus. Would your program fit? Well, so I'm not a specialist in performing artists, but we have a lot of musicians and theater kids every year as part of our roster of clients. So if he's going for conservatories only as a percussionist, then we're probably not a good fit. I mean, I don't have that type of specialization. But if you're looking at liberal arts colleges and possibly majoring or minoring in music and all that is definitely in our wheelhouse. So thanks for that question. John, high school ranking plus loading with AP courses. I don't know if that's a question. I think you're asking me, does attending a top high school factor into admissions decisions? I'm just going out on a limb, so correct me if I'm wrong. The answer is yes. Every high school has a profile that college admissions officers are either very familiar with because they recruit regionally, or if they're new to the region or are not familiar somehow, they read the published profile, which every high school has. You can actually get it from your high school. You can request a copy of it. So high schools that have reputations as being very, very rigorous depending on wherever you live, there's those high schools exist in virtually every, sort of, I would say, urban / upper middle class, mass affluent area, then that will be beneficial to that child. And I'll go even further to say that certain high schools are, quote unquote, feeder high schools to colleges, and you can kind of figure that out by looking at either the profile or looking at the previous 2 year, 3 years worth of admissions results, and you can see which colleges are pretty, highly frequently represented. So the high school's reputation absolutely factors into the admissions decision in some way. But again, there's no quota. Your child's not competing against other kids from that same high school. I know that's hard to believe, and that probably contradicts what your guidance counselor might tell you. But I swear to you, I've had this conversation for years and years and years, not just with my business partner from Princeton, but multiple other admissions officers that I've either known or have worked for me or something along those lines. And you're certainly compared against other kids from your high school because of that high school profile. But in terms of there being like, oh, well, we sent 3 kids to Duke last year, so we can only send 1 this year. That's false. That is urban legend. Or, oh, we'll never get a kid into Stanford because 12 years ago someone got in early decision and then decided not to go. They pulled out. Well, you're actually allowed to do that in the early decision agreement at every college. And admissions officers just don't care about that. So you're not blackballed. That's another, for the most part, an urban legend. Okay, so thanks for asking that. I hope I answered that correctly. Shannon, this might be the last one here. So consider this last call for questions. Shannon, financial aid, student aid index. Do you get penalized if only one parent has income? Well, you're not penalized that way. They look at the number, not necessarily the source. So if only one parent, assuming you're married, has income, that's not an issue at all. I don't see how that would be one. Whoop, I see a couple more sneaking in here. Jared, can I transfer most of my daughter's 529 to my other child so that my daughter can get more financial aid? A lot of people try to do that, and it doesn't do anything because they look at that as on the FAFSA, they look at that as a parent asset. Plus, they know financial aid officers aren't dummies. They know that you can do just what you're doing. So you still have that resource that you could use to pay for college. So that's not going to do anything. That's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, as we say in the biz. So John Fitzgerald says, yes. Okay, good. That's it. That's going to be a wrap for tonight. Thanks a lot for choosing to spend your time with me and Pearl in the background, lurking there. We do enjoy doing these presentations. I hope I delivered. Hope you got everything out of this presentation that you were hoping for. I think I did a good job because I was looking at the survey results and I asked you guys a few times, but if you have any more questions, you can schedule that time with us, the college strategy session. That's free if you book it while you're watching this. And you could always email us if something else comes up. You forgot a question that you wanted an answer to. All right. Have a great night. Bye-bye.